is Gunnar Berg, and today I'm going to talk to you about the history of the NHL. The National Hockey League has been around almost 100 years, as it was founded in 1917. Hockey is a sport loved all across America, and especially in the North Star State, Minnesota. It has been around longer than any of you here today and continues to be one of the most popular sports in America. I've loved the game of hockey since I was little. I never played on an organized team, but I watch the games all the time and have since I was young. I think that the NHL's rich history is interesting and really fun to learn about. The NHL is a history full of new and interesting ideas. The history being discussed today will be in order by era. The early years, the original six, expansion from the original six, and the modern era. According to the NHL opens its first season, the NHL was founded in 1970. The first 5 clubs to join were the Ottawa Senators, the Quebec Bulldogs, the Montreal Canadiens, and the Montreal Wanderers and the Toronto Arenas. Starting out, the war had a pretty big effect on the league. The Quebec Bulldogs decided not to even play in the newly founded NHL, as most of their players had gone to serve in the military. Angel Fire reports that they then decided that since they had so few players, they wouldn't have a team, and the rest of the players still on the team were equally dispersed among the remaining teams. To get things started, the 4 remaining teams played each other. The Montreal Wanderers started things off with a game against the Toronto Arenas, which Montreal won 10-9. Then the Canadiens played the Ottawa Senators in a game which the Canadiens won 7-4. Within the same year the league started, it just about came to an abrupt end. On the night of January 2nd, 1918, a fire had started in the Montreal Arena, causing it to be completely destroyed. The destruction of the Montreal Arena caused the Wanderers to drop out of the league, while the Canadiens, who shared a stadium with the Wanderers, just found a small ice rink arena to play in. The rest of the year, the league struggled with just 3 teams left to compete. Now the NHL would have to find a way to have a season. Their plan for the new season was to have a split schedule. How this would work is that there would be 2 sections each, containing 10 games. The winners of each segment would then go on to compete in a playoff to decide the champion. But late in the season, one of the 3 teams, the Toronto Arenas, had to pull out of the league after they ran into financial troubles. That left only 2 teams, the Canadiens and the Senators, in the league. Both the teams competed in a best-of-7 series, which the Canadiens won. After a season in which the NHL had 2 teams in it, the war ended and interest in the league began to rise. For the 1919 season, the Quebec Bulldogs had rejoined the league. All the players that had joined other teams or left for the service had come back to the team. One of the players was Joe Malone, the star player. According to hockey sites in Canada, he went on to score 7 goals in 1 game, which still stands as the record today. The Bulldogs didn't last long, though. They ran into money problems and had to relocate. They moved to Hamilton, Ontario, and became the Hamilton Tigers. By 1924, the NHL added many new teams. Montreal had been given another team, named the Montreal Maroons. The Boston had been given a franchise. They were called the Bruins. And there had also been many other small franchises like the Pittsburgh Pirates and the St. Louis Eagles. The New York Rangers, Chicago Blackhawks, and the Detroit Red Wings had also joined by 1926, according to the Triangle Original Six. With the popularity growing and the earlier struggles of teams coming and going, becoming a thing of the past was paved for the Original Six. The 25-year era of the Original Six set everything up about what today's NHL came to be. The Original Six finally got settled in 1942. For a couple decades, teams had come and gone, but only 6 had stuck around. The 6 teams were the Chicago Blackhawks, the Detroit Red Wings, the Toronto Maple Leafs, the Montreal Canadiens, the Boston Bruins, and the New York Rangers. While the Original Six and the NHL enjoyed much success, they were heavily criticized in some of the rules. One of the main things criticized was the playoff rules. The format they used was that only 1 team was eliminated after the regular season. Since the league was dominated by 3 teams, there was really only 1 chance for the others to get in. Another thing the NHL caught a lot of flack for was the dominance of the 3 teams. Montreal was a lock in the playoffs, having made 18 in a row, and same with the Maple Leafs and Red Wings, who only missed the playoffs 3 times each. One more of the crazy things the NHL did that got a lot of criticism was their rule on accruement and rights to sign certain players. Each team had the right to sign any player within a 50-mile radius of the arena. So with that rule, the bigger city teams had a better advantage at signing more good quality players, and if the player wasn't within the 50-mile radius, they could receive offers from any team in the league and join them. While the league was under much criticism, there was corruption in team ownership and player treatment. There was one man named James E. Norris who led a lot of things in the NHL. He was the owner of the Red Wings, and he was also the owner of the Blackhawks, and he was also the biggest stockholder in the Rangers franchise. He wasn't the only corrupt owner in the NHL, though. Many of the owners were like dictators. The players had to be careful to treat them right and not to stay on their good side. If you mistreated the owner and he didn't like you, you would be punished. Some players were sent to the minors and forced to take a pay cut. Other players that got on the bad side could have been traded to a bad team that was in last place. There was a lot of other things that players had to go through with the organizations. The medical plans they had were not very good. They were only covered for 2 months after the injury, and in the NHL back then, injuries were very numerous. And if you got traded, the relocation costs were not covered by the team. One more thing about the player mistreatment in this era was that the contracts they signed didn't let them get salaries from off-season promotions or playing any other amateur sports. All of this stuff led up to trying new stuff and finding the right rules and regulations to usher in the next era of the NHL, the expansion era. The expansion era started in 1967, where the NHL added 6 new teams. They had a plan to make a Western and Eastern division. The original 6 teams were grouped in the Eastern division, and 6 new teams were created to create the Western division. The expansion years lasted from 1967 to 1992. Throughout these many years, the NHL had expanded to a total of 21 teams by 1979 and added 1 more by 1992 to have a total of 22 to bring us to the modern era. The modern era began in 1992, where the league grew rapidly, expanding to 30 teams, where we stand today. Labor disputes had caused lockouts and problems for the new NHL. One became so intense that the entire 2004 to 2005 season was canceled. The most recent lockout was the 2012-2013 season, where about 40% of the season wasn't played and canceled. The NHL is loaded with a lot of history, a very rich one at that. The early times of the league was filled with much uncertainty that led into the prosperous times of the original 6 and the expansion eras. The recent modern NHL has also enjoyed much success. As an avid hockey fan, it was a lot of fun to learn about the history of the NHL, and I hope you enjoyed it too. Thank you for your time.